And I think, suffice to say, this hasn't been a great Lunar New Year celebration for Asia. And the key reason, definitely the sole reason, is the outbreak of the coronavirus in Wuhan that has since spread. Still mainly, mostly in mainland China, but it has gone to various other countries. Of course, the numbers that you see right now in this slide, right, it's outdated, and clearly, right, the numbers are moving in a very fast ways. And of course, as the last point we put down in this slide itself, various governments are extending economic support for the... Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, can. For the various countries itself to deal with this unfortunate outbreak. And in this slide, we are now looking at assessing potential economic impact from the coronavirus. This is not a hard science. This is really difficult from the economic perspective. First, we are not experts on virology. And what we did was we used the 2003 episode of SARS, right, as a guide to how we see this panning out. And we look at this as a 6 months, with a 6 months duration. And so we did that with that as a guideline. We look at it and to gauge the impact on the various economies in the region. Now, this is what I would call a scary chart. Of course, when you see the lines below, right, most of it, the red line and the blue line, refers to the previous episode. And what is different from the previous episode, evidently right now, is the huge amount of number of infections that is taking place, especially in mainland China. And as of now, the numbers have well exceeded 30,000, and that pales in comparison to what we saw in SARS, where the total amount of global outbreak in SARS episode, right, was just slightly above 8,000 itself. Of course, there's many arguments saying that probably some of the numbers back in 2003, right, was not so accurate, where there's underreporting. But nonetheless, right, the numbers still at the current cycle, right, looks pretty much a very scary outlook. Now, that itself, putting that aside, then there is this chart here where you look at the red line itself, which tells you about the daily change. And while the daily change is still in the positive zone, it is showing some signs of stability, although I think it is still too early to say that. Of course, now, right, this chart itself needs to be updated, as I sent this slide over to Huttons last Friday. But needless to say, we are still monitoring the events as unfolding as we speak. And I think the latest numbers is that the number of fatality in China has, I think, just exceeded 900. So this is a simple comparison with the previous episodes of pandemics that occurred in the world in the last, maybe since the Spanish flu, which was recorded in the early 1900s. I think the difference is, of course, some of the numbers, the different infection rates, and right now itself, right, the fatality rate is for the current virus outbreak, right, seems to be still much lower. How this will pan out again, we have to really look at how things evolve, and the crucial point again to monitor what is happening in China. Looking at this event, what are the main triggers or impact on the economy? We identify these three that is on this slide. Services sector, which is quite clear that things like tourism, air transport, retail, entertainment, even education, F&B, this will be impacted in the first round of any kind of outbreak of a kind of virus, and in a very sustained and in a very unknown, uncertain manner. So this will be definitely cause of concerns for this sector, this services sector. If things were to be seen more persistent, more sustained, then the second round of impact will be more prominent, more pronounced in the manufacturing and in terms of trade itself. And that for now, right, we have seen some concerns, but we have yet to assess the real length of the disruption. So that's something that we are still continuing to monitor. And lastly, of course, foreign direct investment flows. We know that China is a huge economy, and more importantly, in recent years, it has also invested heavily in the region, and it is an importer, investor, as well as a recipient of investment, and that could be also impacted if this gets longer than what we expect. The importance of China to Asia in a few slides, this is probably quite easily seen. I think if you look at the blue line on the chart on the right, that is the share of China's trade to ASEAN. And you can see that the trajectory is quite clearly one direction, going up higher. And with China's issue with this coronavirus itself, right, that's why there would be somewhat impact felt by ASEAN. And the longer the issue persists, and I think the longer or the more durable the negative impact will be on the region. The other area, of course, is on tourism. And if you look at the tourist numbers on this slide, clearly China is a growing tourist market for many Asian countries, including Singapore. Of course, Thailand is right on the top of the pecking order. If you compare where China was as an economy in 2003 versus where they are right now, it has moved from being the 6th largest economy in 2003, and right now it is the 2nd largest economy in the world. Its GDP size is basically have increased 8-fold and closing up to at least US, I think, $15 trillion. But of course, this makes it even more painful for the impact on Asia and due to the growing importance of China. So now the next few slides itself, I won't go through too much detail. You can have a look on at your leisure, but this is probably some of the slides telling us about the impact of the economy during SARS. Of course, we have to be quite specific that SARS lasted for about 6 months itself, and then thereafter it was more or less fully eradicated. In the current situation, things remain fairly fluid, and we know that the current coronavirus, right, has been more contagious than the previous episode, although the fatality rate is lower. So still a lot of things that may not be a like-for-like comparison. I start off with this slide talking about real estate prices. And clearly the real estate prices went down in most of this region, and subsequently they saw a rebound. I think the exception, probably the red line itself, was Singapore. And that is probably that has to do with somewhat also about the kind of housing policy measures that we had in place during that period of time. Again, this is on the tourism arrivals. Quite clearly, after a significant dip, there was just as a significant rebound from the episode once the SARS had cleared up. Looking at the retail sales, there was somewhat of impact before that, and then somewhat the retail sales numbers started trending up thereafter. In terms of exports, in fact, the impact was minimal, and right after that, there was a continuation of the growth itself. If you guys may not remember this, but if we talk about Singapore during that period, right, the growth during the year when SARS hit, right, growth at the end of the year itself was actually stronger than the year before. And then the subsequent year in 2005, Singapore recorded one of its strongest years of growth. I think growth came in nearly 10% that year itself. So if the episode was short and sharp, right, there would be quite a strong rebound. In terms of equity markets, quite clearly there was also a clear dip followed by a sustained and very robust recovery. I think in terms of the interest rates or outlook, right, it's a bit of a mixed bag in this sense that during that point of time, right, the Fed was already on a very aggressive rate cutting cycle, as you can see in this chart itself. On the prior year itself, 2001, it was a significant number of cuts, and followed by a few more cuts during 2003. I think they cut twice that year. So the interest rates actually came down. The primary reason was not because of the SARS outbreak, because I think, as you have known, that the outbreak itself only mostly affected the Asian region and largely left the European countries and North Americans largely unscathed from that episode itself. In terms of FX, the US dollar, due to the rate cutting cycle itself, was already trending down during that point, and most of the other major currencies was actually strengthening. Again, this is what happened during the FX market during SARS, where you see the Asian currencies itself had an initial knee jerk and then subsequently came back down again. So after talking about that episode, let me talk about something that may be a bit more, I would say that closer to the macroeconomy rather than virology. This is about the US economy. I think in a nutshell, after last year's rather worrisome year of a recession, risk for recession for US has lowered in 2020. And in terms of policy rates, it's expected to be low or lower from where we are right now. The few points to note for the US recession is that we are looking at, in this chart itself, the top green bar, right, a record US economic expansion cycle, the longest since the data was made available, I think, since the post-World War II. And realistically, right, at some point you do expect some matter of slowdown, but this is a point of great contention amongst, I think, a lot of economic researchers, because like if you know that a few years ago, people have been calling the US recession to be coming, and every year without fail, right, most of us was proven wrong. So at this point, right, I think 2020, we are still not expecting a US recession. Beyond that, there may be a slowdown, but I think suffice to say, the added complexity of the outlook right now is added to by this coronavirus outbreak. Successful containment within the next few weeks or months, right, will definitely put that episode behind us and we can move on to other economic questions. But if that virus persists and expands further, right, that will really put a dent on how we view the global economy in 2020. As I was speaking, the expectations of recession has dipped. But again, when you look at this chart itself, where we are in terms of the recession probability is still not at what you consider low levels. But suffice to say, right, if we do see a recession for the US itself, we don't see a major financial risk, at least not like those what we saw in the Great Financial Crisis in the 2008-2009 period. But we do expect if there was a slowdown, this will be a regular business cycle of a peak and trough, and that the US economy will resume back the normal growth cycle somewhere down the road thereafter. In terms of employment markets, this is really as good as it gets. These slides were sent on Friday itself, but on last Friday, we came up with a very strong jobs number for the US, more than 200,000, 225,000 to be exact, jobs created in US in January. Unemployment picked up a bit, but that was because more people were looking for jobs in the US, which is always a good sign. And wages growth was remarkably strong as well at above 3%. And that makes it 18 months in a row where wage growth is 3% or higher in the US. And right now, we do see that the coronavirus risk itself, if anything, right, does add to our possibility of seeing another Fed cut in this quarter, somewhere in March, and that would actually be helpful for the markets. I think China's growth itself, if you see beyond even from before the latest episode, has been on a structural decline. And there's a good reason for it, because the economy in China has been transforming. It is becoming less export-based, less investment-driven, and more domestic demand-driven. And with any kind of transformation like that, right, I think growth is expected to start slowing. But what is different is that the quantity may be dropping, but the quality of growth is improving. Unfortunately, right now, you overlay it with the complexity of a coronavirus outbreak, right? That would actually have a short-term negative impact on the GDP, and we think that China's first quarter GDP is now going to be closer to 5% rather than 6%. In terms of interest rates, the region, we've seen them cutting rates, some of the central banks are cutting rates again, and the accommodative stance is likely to extend into 2020. In terms of the trade deal, when it had boosted the Asian currencies itself, unfortunately for this coronavirus outbreak, right, that episode has ended the Asian dollar strength, and now we are seeing Asian dollar broadly weaker, especially if you look at the currencies itself. Sing dollar and Thai baht stand out in terms of weakness. Moving to the main topic of actually what I was supposed to talk about, right, is actually fairly short. If we get through the episode of coronavirus within that set timeline of 6 months and things go back to business as usual, I believe the impact, right, of 2020, right, what we will be looking at 2020, right, will be the US elections. US elections takes place at the end of the year, and typically I don't think they will be very busy. The US Americans will be very busy doing the campaign, right? Then the trade war or the trade negotiations between them and China, right, will likely continue but take a back seat. However, that would be the base case for what we expect in 2020. If you look forward to 2021 itself, right, as this slide, we put a short clip of what the former founder for Alibaba, the former chairman, Jack Ma has said that people should be preparing 20 years of the US-China trade war. And that is because this, as we put in a little paragraph there, right, this is beyond just trade itself. This is really a confrontation between two countries in terms of military, economic, intellectual property, and being the superpower of the world. And you can envisage that after the US elections itself, where we expect US President Trump to be re-elected for a second term, this will become his pet topic of concern. So, in the nutshell, 2020 will likely see, once the outbreak has been put under control, the attention will go back to the US elections cycle, whereby during this period, right, we'll see a period of relative calm, at least in terms of financial markets, while the politicians are busy fighting it out for an election result. But after 2020 itself, in 2021 onwards, we believe that the overall well-being risk factor, right, would be a resurgence of the confrontation between US and China, both on the trade front and on various other fronts in terms of technology and military, etc. In terms of key forecasts, I end off, pretty much these are some of the key things that we're looking out for. Growth itself, I think the impact from China due to the coronavirus is now going to see a sharp slowdown in the first quarter. And thereafter, we see a gradual recovery. The recovery we are looking at looks more like a hockey stick. But of course, if things don't turn out as well, it might easily become a U shape. So do watch out for those developments. Other areas of forecast in terms of FX, in terms of the growth rates outlook, I think currency-wise, I think the knee-jerk reaction on China CNY weakness is the question of how long that will take. And we think that the CNY subsequently will recover and end the year towards the end of this year, go back below 7 at around 6.9 in fourth quarter of 2020. Major currency-wise, weakness in the near term, but definitely I think US dollar would see it peaking somewhere this year against the major FX, and then we'll see them strengthening against the US dollar across the period. I think this one here we highlighted the euro on this page. And on this page itself, I think on the rates front, as we expect another Fed rate cut itself, we do expect LIBOR, SIBOR and SOR to drop a bit more. I think these are some of the forecasts we have. I think for example, for 3-month SIBOR itself, we are looking at 1.55%. 3-month SOR is at 1.45%. And I think just a quick roundup, gold itself, I believe that there will still be robust safe haven demand, especially on this episode. And even after this episode itself, there are quite a lot of strong demand coming up from other places, like for example central bank buying, where as they are switching reliance from basing too much on US dollar, and that could be one of the key factors that are still supportive of gold. And we are looking at gold ending the year close to where around 1,550 by end of this year. Then there's some forecast for oil as well. I don't think oil will go too much away from where we are. I think we are looking at these rates where the oil will be trading. And I think I'm more or less done with my presentation. Just a last word on the currency itself. Dollar Sing weakness due to this current episode may be a triggering point for it to go back higher at the end of the year from where stronger where we are if the China renminbi also strengthens. With that, I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Alvin, for the enlightening sharing on the economy for Singapore as well as the global outlook also. For now, I will share Hutton's view on the property market in 2020 itself. Of course, now I think everywhere you go, you cannot avoid talking about this coronavirus. Even my preschool kid also come and ask me, what is this virus? Except they can't pronounce corona. What they tell me is, Papa, what is coconut virus? I was figuring out for quite some time what they mean by that. But essentially, this is something that came out from China and now it's spreading throughout the world. But the thing that a lot of people on people's mind is that, how is this virus going to affect the property market in Singapore itself? So we do not have any so-called precedent on this coronavirus. It's something new. What we can always look back on history is what happened during the SARS period. So if we are to look at SARS itself, there is actually not that much of an impact when SARS happened on the property market. Just take a look at this chart itself. In March 2003, we have our first SARS case, and then WHO declared SARS was so-called eradicated in Singapore in July 2003. If you look at the developer sales volume, number of units launched as well as how much they sell 6 months before March 2003 and 6 months after March 2003, you realize that the two numbers don't differ much. The 6 months before, that means from 2002 Q2 until 2002 Q4, developers launched about 3,800 units. They sold 2,008. The 6 months after our first SARS case, developer actually launched 3,005, slightly lower, 10% lower, which is expected because they may hold back or they may launch lesser units itself. But just look at the volume of units that they sell. They sold 3,100 units in the 6 months after our first SARS case, compared to 6 months before, which was only 2008. So, in a way, the property market is resilient in Singapore, partly because the government has certain policies in place actually to so-called support the market, so that the market doesn't have any so-called bad impact in that sense. How about prices itself? I mean, this is just volume. People will probably tell me maybe developer had cut prices. That's why they move a lot of units. Let's see the prices. Again, we look at 6 months, we want 6 months after. This 6 months after the first SARS case in the first quarter of 2003, you realize that the prices didn't move much. It was pretty flat. So there is no noticeable impact of SARS on property prices in Singapore during that period of time. And the thing is, if people, those 3,000 plus people have bought during the SARS period, are these people making money? Or people will say, first mover advantage, they will always have to say that. Or are these people actually the so-called the foolish one who jump in and take the risk? Let's look at some of these numbers. We look at some of these caveats that was lodged during the period of April 2003 until early July 2003. And then we match these numbers until February 2020. We try to pick out matching units transacted itself and look at how much actually these people were made, because they were so brave to go into the market in 2003 when SARS was there. So the results came out pretty positive, I would say. Just look at some of the projects we pick up here. In the core central region, which typically will be your district 9, 10, 11, and downtown core plus Sentosa. Projects like Novena Suites, here at Robertson. Some of the profits that these buyers went in 2003 was pretty spectacular to me. I mean, they have a holding period of, let's say, something like 4 years, 5 years, and their returns is 300,000, or even say at the pier at Robertson, one unit even make more than 1 million by holding on to the unit for 5 years. Then you compare to the rest of the central region and outside central region, these people also make good money also. They have a holding period of about 10 years when they sell, and they make profits of easily 500,000 to 800,000. So SARS or all these viruses, all these things or not, you realize that the property market in Singapore is very resilient, and for buyers who actually went in to buy these new launches during the SARS period, they actually reap quite a fair bit of profits. That's why sometimes people say fortune actually favor the brave, which is actually shown out in these examples here that we have. And coincidentally, this year, 2020, Singapore is going to see quite a fair number of projects being launched in the core central region itself. If history is to repeat again, maybe the brave who go into the core central region this time around when there is a coronavirus would maybe see this kind of profits when they exit in the future. And how about China buyers? Right now, Singapore imposed a 14 days so-called some sort of like quarantine on China people who are holding a China passport entering into Singapore itself. There are people who say, the core central region, the luxury market is going to be affected by the absence of these buyers. Will that really be the case? Let's look at what was sold in 2019. We had 9,912 units that were sold. Who are these buyers who are holding a China passport? When you look at the caveats from URA, actually it shows only 87 of them holding a China passport. Makes up probably 1%. The bulk of the China buyers who are buying properties in Singapore are actually permanent residents. So if this group of 80 plus people is being controlled in this point, at this point of time for maybe 3 months or 6 months itself, then you are looking at a very small number, which is only like less than even 100. Are they going to affect the market volume? I would think not. The Singapore property market, by and large, is still supported by people who are living here. 80% are Singaporeans buying property in Singapore. The rest are made up of your PR and your foreigners. And these past few years, after government imposed ABSD, foreigners buying properties in Singapore, the percentage varies about 5 to 6%. Not a very large number itself. So I wouldn't say that when you have controls over China visitors, you are going to see a big impact on the Singapore property market. After having covered what we feel will be the impact of the coronavirus on the property market, now let's talk a bit about what has happened in 2019 before we talk about the market outlook. I will go through the year in review very fast because papers you read about it and everywhere, online articles and so on and so forth. Property prices have been up 2.7% in 2019. We are just slightly off the peak that we see in the quarter of 2013, 0.6% itself. So what does that mean to people? We must bear in mind that this price gain was on the back of what? New property cooling measures that was imposed by government in July 2018. And then we have a period of quite slow sales in the first quarter of 2019 itself. And then we also see slight price decline in the fourth quarter of 2018 and the first quarter of 2019. But subsequently, prices recovered. And this actually shows that the market here, the demand here is actually very strong. And developers right now, they are pricing the projects very sensitively. And this actually makes up for, if buyers are actually prepared to commit, they can actually find very good deal in the market. And if the property market price continue to go up in 2020 and 2021, we will again so-called fulfill what was achieved in the history, where the peak in the property market, the new peak is always higher than the previous peak itself. And we are not very far off from that. We're just 0.6% away from it. New sales every quarter in 2019, we are higher than what we've seen in 2018, such that we even exceed the 2018 entire year sales of 8,795. We achieved 9,912 in 2019. That is a very remarkable sales number. Resale volume-wise, yes, about stabilized between the range of about 2,300 to 2,400 units itself. Resale volume has been quite low, partly because of the cooling measure and also because developer has rolled out many launches in 2019 in the tune of maybe 56 or 57 launches itself. That's why it has taken some of the demand away from the resale market. HDB-wise, we have seen very good news coming out from HDB market. After coming down for more than 5 years, since 2013, we've seen 2 consecutive quarters of HDB resale price inching up. And such that we end the entire year of 2019 up 0.1%. This is achieved on the back of very so-called, I would say, accommodative policies on the HDB resale market side, where government relax the usage of CPF for older properties. Then they raised the income ceiling for HDB properties. And after that, they also so-called increase the grants that is given to first-time buyer of resale properties. Right now, if you go into the resale market, the amount of grants you can get is up to 160,000 compared to the amount of grants you can get in the new home market, which is only 80,000. So this big gap of 80,000 can actually help to bridge the gap between a new flat price and a resale flat price itself, so that buyers who actually have an urgent need for a home now can actually tap on this additional grant to actually go into the resale market. That's why the resale market has seen more interest in the last quarter of 2019 itself, and the whole volume also has increased, which you see now in this slide, that we have higher resale volume in 2019 versus 2018. Now, where is the market going to head towards in 2020 if we put aside the coronavirus itself? Of course, this will affect the economic growth, which is already explained by Alvin, and UOB is not the only bank who say that this will affect the economic growth also. So I think everyone is expecting some impact on the economic growth, particularly on the tourism side. So I'm not an expert, I leave it to them. Okay, but when we talk about property market, I think we should look very on only two things: the demand and the supply. Demand-wise, where is the demand coming from? We look at the population white paper, which was launched many years ago, 7-8 years ago, I think. And this is the so-called midpoint for the government to actually take stock of what they have achieved and whether there's a need to revise some of these targets in 2020. And whether this number will come out and in the first half of the year, we don't know. But the government has already promised in Parliament also that they will provide an update on that. But if you look at the targets itself, they are looking at a target population of 5.8 to 6 million. In 2019, our population is 5.7. We are not far off from the 5.8 million. Then we look at what are the targets that are set inside. Expand the rail network by 100 kilometers, which they are actually on track to achieving that already. And then they want to have 800 new buses over the next 5 years. They have already added the 800 buses into the bus network. So they already achieved that. Hospital bed, they are building a lot of hospitals island-wide. So I would say that whatever they sell in population white paper, when they give the 2020 update, they will really achieve that. And our government is known for achieving what they have promised to achieve. So in 2020-wise, 2030, I would say, they are looking at a population of 6.5 to 6.9 million. Even they, right now, let's say people are saying they are controlling the amount of intake of foreigners, PRs, as well as new citizens, and so on and so forth. Will they reach the 6.5? We will probably know that when they give an update on 2020. But based on past experience, they have always been on track for what they have promised. Just take a look at this population chart that we have here. Just look at the past 2 years. The government has been increasing the growth of the population for the past 2 years. Right now in 2019, the population growth rate is 1.2% over 2018. And then for the past 10 years, means from 2019 until 2009, the average population growth is 1.4%. So even if we move forward, let's say for example, I take into account that we are not having more babies, all this population growth, the government is controlling it. Let's say I put it at a lower growth than the 1.4, I put at 1.1%. Where will we reach in terms of population by 2030? If I compound this over the next 11 years, or rather the next 10 years itself, I will reach a population of 6.43 million. Am I far away from the 6.5 that the government envisaged in the population white paper? It's not far away. So we can work on this, or we can work on the 6.5 million. But all in, it also means that population has to grow. And government has also come out, Mr. Chan Chun Sing has also said, we cannot afford to have zero growth in the intake of foreigners into Singapore. Otherwise, we'll lose out on a lot of investment opportunity. Companies will not come to invest in Singapore, and the economy will not grow, and we are actually worse off, because when all this investment go to other places, our economy will not benefit. It will actually benefit other countries. And our local population, resident working population, is going to probably hit a peak and maybe shrink by 2020 if we don't do any new so-called population intake into Singapore. We don't want to have the same kind of situation as some other countries in Asia where they suffer so-called very low growth, and or even in Europe itself. So they are managing this population intake very carefully so that there is still a strong local core, which they maintain about 60% Singaporeans within Singapore itself. So out of this 5.7 that we have now, probably about 61% are actually Singapore citizens. And then not forgetting that is on the population white paper where population will grow. We are also looking at another pool of buyers from the HDB upgraders market. HDB resale prices have bottomed and are moving up, and government has built a lot of homes after 2011, and these homes are going to get their MOP in the years to come. These numbers are collected from data.gov based on the so-called TOP dates of flats from 2015 all the way until your 2019. So we just put a 5-year MOP, which is a fixed year that doesn't move. And we have that numbers like in 2020, we're going to see about 20,000 potential HDB upgraders, 21,000 in 2021, and in 2022, we're going to see 25,000. These are all your potential people who will look to upgrade to a private property if they can afford. If not a private property, they will also look at, say, EC, because there is still some concerns on the so-called lease decay issue in HDB flats. After 99 years, everything will go to zero. Whereas if and the sales for HDB flats is very low, and not every flat gets the opportunity to have sales, and the verse wise, whatever is the requirement, whatever is the payout, it is still a big unknown. Whereas if they can move up to a private property or even to an EC, in the future they have a chance to put forth their development for en bloc. And when they do so, they stand to cash out from any potential, and then they can actually move on to another property itself. So much on demand. Now let's look at supply. How much stock do we have in the market? The unsold stock that we have in the market right now is about 30,000 units. And this has been on the downtrend for the 3 consecutive quarters. If you want to compare this against the previous high, which was achieved somewhere in 2009, it was 43,000. We are 31% below that. And these numbers have been coming out consistently because there is a lot of latent demand that come back to the market and absorb some of these units from the developer. And we do see this going to be on the downtrend moving forward. Why do we see the unsold numbers on the downtrend? It's also because government has control on the supply side. And then the thing is also, people has the impression that 30,000 unsold stock is a lot in the whole market. But we also need to so-called put that into context. 30,000 doesn't mean as a buyer you can afford to buy all the 30,000 units. If you have unlimited budget, you can buy all the 30,000 units, then I say yes, you can have your pick of the cherry, whichever thing that you want to buy. But everybody who wants to buy, say, a home, or buy anything for that matter, whether you want to buy a car or you want to go to the supermarket now, I think you have a lot of stock there ready for you to buy. They have restocked everything in NTUC. Now they put restriction on how much you can buy also. But you have a certain budget in mind and what you want to buy. Let's put an example for you. Look at this bread here. So nice that it's segmented into 3. if you have a budget of $2, where do you think, which shelf can you buy the bread from? I think it's the bottom shelf. If let's say you have $2.50 or $2.70, which is the one you can afford? I think it's the middle one. If you have anything above $3, I think you can buy the top shelf. This is the truth of the matter in terms of this supply situation in the market. We need to look at the supply from your own perspective, from in your terms of own context, how much you can afford. And the example that I quoted just now, $2, $2.50 and $3, it is relative to how the market is segmented. The $2 I would probably say is the mass market. The $2.50 is your city fringe, and your $3 is going to be your luxury market. So where are you competing in terms of all this? I mean, all the bread sellers, they also know where they want to compete also. That's why sometimes some of the bread, the very expensive bread, you don't see them making lots of volume because not many people want to buy that kind of bread. So it comes back to the same thing also. Where you can afford and where you are looking at. If you look at what was sold in 2019, actually 70% of the new sales are 1.5 million and below. But if you have a budget of 1 million, that means last year 26% of people are actually buying all these numbers, all these properties. And then you have a budget of 1 to 1.25 million. Last year, 23% of people bought these kind of properties. And you have a budget of 1.25 to 1.5, another 20%. So just be mindful that the supply in the market is not a so-called like you have this amount of money, you can buy everything. You can only buy based on what the bank can borrow you, so that actually you are looking at a very smaller segment of the market itself. And developers know very well how much buyers can afford and how much buyers they are actually, the demand is potentially there also. So you realize that certain segment of the market, developers don't build very large units or don't price their units very high. Otherwise, they will not be able to find a lot of buyers for those. So it's a lot of on affordability things, and developers are aware of this. So as a buyer, you should also be mindful of this and take note of all this. And actually, Huttons has an app to actually for agents actually to find out based on a certain budget and in certain district how much supply is actually available for buyers to consider. And I tell you, the numbers are not, say, in the numbers of thousands. It's less than 100 for a certain district, for a certain budget itself. And sometimes it's only like 20, 30 of such units in a particular district that you like. So if you want to find out more, speak to a Huttons associate and they can actually share all this information with you. And that's just that part where I talk about the entire market supply. We also need to remember one thing is that URA cut the number of units that's allowed to build in condo and private flats in 2018 itself. And this took effect in 2019 January. That means all the new projects that got approval after January 2019, the number of units you can build on a piece of land is actually smaller. Last time, the average size is 70 square meter. Now, if you're outside the central area, average size must be 85 square meter. And if that means it's a cut of 18% on that. And if you're in the nice specified areas that URA have carved out, the average size must be 100 square meter. That means in this area, there will be a drop in terms of supply by 30%. That is a very huge number. So supply here, government is controlling. And not only on that, they also control on the government and sales side. Supply is at its lowest since the first half of 2016. At a 3-year low, 2007. We are not seeing the kind of numbers where we had, say, in 2011, where you have 8,000 dwelling units being put on the confirmed list for developer bid for. Right now we are having only 1,007 compared to 8,000 in the past. Supply is being controlled by the government, such that we feel that there may not be enough supply to meet demand. Why? Just look at the number of demand for homes for the past 10 years, which is represented by the orange bar here. The 10-year average annual demand is about 12,000 units. Look at what we are going to have when we move forward for the next 5 years. That means from 2020 all the way until 2024. The average annual supply is 10,000 units. If demand continue as what we see for the past 10 years and moving forward, it will be 12,000. We are going to face an undersupply issue, because you build 10,000 but there are 12,000 people wanting to buy or wanting to move into a private home. Of course, they can go into, say, a completed units market. But how many of such units are there in the market? There are not a lot. The completed supply is very, very low, because government put in place like your ABSD, your qualifying certificate on developers. So developers definitely have to try to sell all these units to avoid paying penalties to the government. So do you think developer want to pay penalty to the government by holding on to just one unit itself? No. So they are completed stock. They will definitely try ways and means to clear out everything. And not forgetting, population is going to grow. Let's say go to 6.5, or based on earlier my projection say 6.4 million. So you're going to have an increase from the current of 5.7. So 700,000 people who will need a place to stay, whether they buy or they rent itself. Right now the occupancy rate is more than 94%. That means out of every 100 homes, you are going to see 5 homes that's empty. So these people, where are they going to stay? If they don't stay in a home, they are going to buy. And if they want to buy, are we building enough for them to buy? Then the unsold numbers, which earlier we covered, 30,000 units. Just look at this blue line here that we have. This blue line captures the period. This period that I presented here is where we start to have a lot of policy intervention by the government in terms of cooling measure. So this roughly tells us whether, or give us some so-called insight as to when the market will properly turn. You see, previously, when developers start going back into the market to look for land, that was in 2016. Why? Because at that point in time, the number of unsold units in the market actually went below 20,000. At no point in time, there will be zero unsold unit in the market. I just have to put this across very clearly. So you see, in 2016, when the unsold number go below 20,000, developers start actively looking for land already, which triggered the first en bloc of Sun Fu View in 2016. And after that, the strong en bloc cycle that kick-started in 2017 and 2018 itself, until it was put to a stop by the government. So right now, we have 30,000 unsold units. Let's say this year in 2020, we sell 9,000 to 10,000 units, or I just take 9,000. So it means in 2021, I may be left with only 21,000 unsold units. Of course, let's say 2021 I have GLS that have been sold this year, which is 1,007 in the first half. Let's say I add all this into the market itself, 1,007. Then just now I said I would 21,000, so I have 22. So it means that maybe by the early part of 2021, the unsold numbers is going to go below 20,000 again. And that is possibly when developer will start to look for land again. And you may say, this might not hold true, but look at the ABSD again in detail. ABSD is a 5-year penalty on developer, 5-year timeline on developer to sell out everything. When the developer start looking for land in 2016, so if they successfully got that piece of land in 2016, the 5 years start ticking from 2016. And when will the 5 year end? In 2021. So it means once some of these developers have cleared all their units that they bought, the land that they bought in 2016, by 2021, they have no land in their inventory to build. What will they do? They definitely go and enter into the market to buy land again. So definitely in 2021, you are going to see some of these developers going back into the market to look for land, and that could lead to a potential upswing in 2021. That's why in 2020, we still expect public property prices to actually rise. Of course, right now, the unknown is how long this coronavirus is going to last and what is so-called the impact on the market in terms of prices. But based on what we've seen in the past during SARS, the impact is likely to be temporary. If any, it's going to be quite flattish price growth. And when price growth is flattish, it's good news again for buyers, because you don't want to developers keep raising the prices and then you're being caught out by that. So in a nutshell, what we feel that in 2020, economic growth has stabilized. Of course, the Wuhan virus is going to affect economic growth by a bit. Singapore is also seen as a safe and stable environment. Currently, we have low supply, and moving forward, we have limited supply also. And right now, the quantum and outlay is lower, because in the future, when the average size of a unit goes up to 85 square meter or 100 square meter, developers need to build larger units. Even if they price at the current price point and they don't increase price, you can expect that your eventual quantum to be much higher and your entire outlay will be much more. So you should take advantage of a current low quantum itself to enter the market, and not wait until when developer change the prices because by virtue of a bigger unit, then you start thinking that you want to enter the market. And not forgetting one thing is that GST increase is going to come sometime. Definitely, I think after the general election. But a 2 percentage point increase in that, in terms of construction costs, all the material, everything, some of this will be passed on to consumers in terms of the property prices. And do you want to pay for that in the future, or you want to go into buy now where the GST is still at the current 7%? And in this year, we're expecting something 40 to 50 projects to be launched, about 11,000 units itself. Half of these are actually in the CCR, the rest are equally split between your RCR and your OCR. If you are looking for EC, very good news for you. We have 3 EC launches in 2020, with the first one, Park Canberra, which opened the show flat on 31st of January, and actually attracted more than 5,000 people visiting the show flat. And the EAPS is going to close, or maybe has already closed itself. So the balloting will take place. And we see prices probably increasing between 3 and 5% in 2020. But of course, the coronavirus may put some downward pressure on our forecast on prices, and also on the take-up of between 9,000 to 10,000, which is maybe affected as well. With that, I end my presentation. If no other questions, we thank you very much for watching Hutton's Facebook Live together this evening with UOB. So follow Hutton's Facebook page and our on social media to keep abreast of what's happening in the property market. Thank you very much.